Ladies and gentlemen, please resume your seats. Gentlemen. Oh, and Eddie. Right. We are now going to try and get rid of a couple of quick ones. Right. Item 14, Pear Paddock, Simmons Lane, Yalding, Kent, is a starred item. There are no members of the public or councillors wishing to speak to it. I therefore ask if any member is likely to wish to speak to this application. Mr Murdoch, for the applicant, are you here? I am. You've heard that no member wishes to speak to this application. Would you therefore withdraw your right to speak?
Move the recommendation on papers.
Seconded. All those in favour of granting approval? Congratulations. Have an early-ish evening. Sorry? Pear Paddock. Proposed, Councillor Harwood. Seconded me. Granted.
The votes?
Unanimous. Sorry? Who voted against it? Right. Oh, right. Sorry. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I thought that was everyone. Those against? Right. Abstentions? Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Mumford? Abstentions? No? Yes. Right. Thank you. Right. Thank you. Yes. Good. Now it adds up. Right. Sorry about that. Thought it was unanimous. It's my fault. Right. Right. We now move to Mount Lodge, Church Lane, Bearsted. We did have a speaker on this. However, Councillor Springett, I think, was so overcome with excitement with the previous discussion that she's had to go home and apologises. Therefore, we are in a position where we have no speakers. Hang on a moment. I've got to... Mr Street for the applicant. As you've heard, no members wish to speak against the application or to the application. In that case, do you withdraw your right to speak? Thank you very much. Do I see a proposer for the recommendation? Councillor Harwood. Councillor Spooner seconding. All those in favour of granting the recommendation? Yeah, that is everyone, I think, but I'll ask anyway. Abstentions? Votes against? No, that was everyone. Thank you very much. Right, Mr Street, have a nice evening. Sadly, members, I can't guarantee that we will go at this pace any later. We return to the rather more action-packed part of the agenda in terms of the public. And we move to item 22. Page 123, land to the east of Hermitage Lane, Maidstone, Kent. Right, while the officers are changing to that, can I take declarations of lobbying on this application? That's almost everyone. Councillor Butler, were you lobbied? No. Councillor Spooner wasn't either. So that's almost everyone. Right, I ask the officer to introduce the first of the two Hermitage Lane applications, number 22 on page 123.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This is an application for reserve matters, appearance of landscaping, layout, scale and appearance. Members will know, and I'll refer members to Appendix A on page 145 and also Appendix B, which sets out the conditions on the outline approval which was granted by the Secretary of State. Members will also be aware that Phase 1, as set out in the committee report, was approved by this committee and the approval decision notice was issued on the 20th of December 2016. So we are now into Phase 2, and this is an application for 119 dwellings with associated infrastructure. So, in terms of most of the members around here will know this site, one of the largest allocations under the previous local plan, not so now. under this local plan, but obviously it's covered by policy H12 of the adopted local plan. In terms of giving some directions, this is the restricted byway, Hermitage Lane. You've now got access coming through, which is already constructed, and they're now starting on phase 1 of the site, and you'll see that in the photographs. In terms of where this application seeks reserve matters for, it's down this particular area, and you've got this area and those trees which are affected by the TPO. You've got public rights of way up here through Bluebell Wood and the ancient woodland here. So you've got ancient woodland, secondary woodland, and what's colloquially known as the hospital field, with Maidstone Hospital here in the car parking area. So, in terms of the application, the red is the application site. Obviously, as I've referred, this is the access road, and phase 1 that's already been approved looked at this area around here. This is the continuation of that. So, if I say the building blocks and the design blocks were created by the approval of the outline consent along the primary access route, and now you're looking at the phase 2 scheme. So again, in greater detail, this is the phasing plan that was approved. You're considering phase 2, and later on in the next agenda item is phase 2A, which is this one here. So in terms of the overall master plan of the site, this is a strategic allocation in the local plan. Obviously, you'd expect the site to follow the general aims and principles of a strategic master plan. This is illustrative, so it's not for consideration, but it shows how the evolution of the site is progressing. So what you're considering tonight is this area here, around here, and obviously the next application will consider there. In terms of just take you through the site access on the site, Hermitage Lane. This is looking into the site where you've got the phase 1 houses being developed here. Looking back towards the access, which is a signal control junction. This is looking at over towards the field that's reserved for the school, and then just behind that, so you've got the main access road up here. You've got the cycle routes on the left-hand side here, and you've got the pedestrian on the other side, and you've got the community centre to the other side of this area. This is the entrance to the site. You've got the restricted byway KB47 off on this area here. So these are the current restrictions that are in place on the site. And this is the starting of the construction of phase 1 on site. So this is looking down the restricted byway. Obviously, up to this point and continuing further down, you've got access to the reservoir by South Eastern Water. So there is, whilst it's a restricted byway, South East Water have access rights to to their entrance to the reservoir. This is looking further down, and this is just showing the access point to the South and Eastern Water Reservoir off here, and then the restricted byway continues further down. This is just further down that restricted byway, and you're just coming off to the point here roughly where the next application you'll see crosses this byway and creates access to the new community centre, which is proposed off to the left-hand side in that pear orchard. So this all forms part of the outline consent that was approved as you set out on Appendix A and B. This is just looking back up the restricted byway, and it just looks at panoramic view moving anti-clockwise. So you've got the ancient woodlands, and the next photographs will just move anti-clockwise around the site and looking around the phase 2 area. You've got the phase 1 site over here, the main access spine road that comes down off here and then goes off down to the left of the photograph. This is the approximate point of the crossing for the community centre which crosses this byway. I would just point out that obviously you're not considering access as part of this application. It's only reserve matters relating to appearance, layout, scale and landscaping. So access has already been approved as part of the outline consent. So this is just moving round. This is moving round on that anti-clockwise direction. And as we continue round the site, you're then moving down to the area where you've got Howard Drive just off behind the trees here, and these are those TPO trees. And then we're moving around the site This is back onto the restricted byway, so you've got the Phase 2 site over here. So Phase 2 land is off to the right-hand side of the photo. And then this is that boundary. So in terms of you've got Howard Drive that are in front of these trees, and this is the belt of woodland that is the part of the TPO issue. This forms part of the consideration of the application in terms of the landscaping, and it's within this area. As I move forward on the plans, you'll see in terms of where the attenuation basins are proposed to be located and that deal with the surface water management of the site, and where additional landscaping is proposed. This is just looking at the bus-only access. As I said, it links into the Phase 2 site. It's a restricted access to bus, pedestrians and cyclists only. As I said, it's just shown for information purposes only, and this is looking back in the opposite direction, and you've got the ancient woodland over here. Again, this just shows the entrance, and I'm just looking back down the entrance. You've got the community orchard here. It's already been laid out, and this is just looking back down towards Hermitage Lane here. So, turning to the consideration as part of this application. So this is the layout for the Phase 2. So in terms of this is the buffer area that you've got between the Howard Drive properties, which ranges approximately between 100 and 122 metres as it's varying in distance around this area. These areas are the attenuation basins, which are designed as wet ponds to aid the biodiversity of the site. You've got the principal access, primary access route, which was established by the outline consent, and that carries on through the site to Howard Drive. So that is the primary route, and then you've got your tertiary routes around here, and you've got a secondary route up here, which leads to the other item on the agenda, which is the community centre. And I'm just going on to this slide because that's just an artist impression of how the community centre will look coming from this main access route. So you'll notice the scale of the buildings have been designed to promote and elongate the view to the community centre to promote its designation in the community as being an important aspect of the design element. So it just gives you an illustration of how the layout has been designed. In the committee report, it shows you conceptually how the concept of that was reached to promote the community centre. As I previously said, you've got the scale of buildings as I go into the report, which is principally either 2- and 3-storey around this area here, and they cascade to the outer edges of the site to 2-storey. So moving on, just some house types. I'll move through these very quickly. Some important elements in terms of the Ragstone building. That continues again the Phase 1 building and tries to pick up what are the key buildings of the site, not to use Ragstone on every building around the site, but to use it on those important buildings to promote that sense of place. And this continues in terms of one of the larger buildings. You'll see a Ragstone sort of almost gable frontage here, and then you've got yellow stock brick that's around it. So it sort of uses Ragstone, which is a very important local material, on those important buildings. And again, this just shows you another example where you're facing the important element of the building in a Ragstone. Street scene elevations, I'm not going to go into a huge element of detail. They give you the concept in terms of the primary street, which is, say, for instance, this one. This is the access that you'd see, so down towards the community centre, and you'd see the community centre building through here. And this just gives you a concept of how the building types have been designed. So 3-storey along the primary frontage, gradually cascading as you reach sort of the edge here, and then again 3-storey when you go up to this area here to promote the community centre. So that, that's that approach as you go down towards the community centre, where you've promoted that street with larger scale buildings. In terms of hard surface materials, pallet, this is what's proposed. It's a high quality materials pallet. In terms of the housing mix, it's sort of the detail sets out the scale of the buildings with principally 1 bed, and you've got a range and mix of 3 beds as denoted by the colours. Materials palette again, in terms of slate, which continues the principles along Primary Street, in terms of roof tiles, and then you've got plain tiles along here, and then you've got a mixture of yellow and red multi-stock bricks. Again, continue the palette that was agreed and approved by members down onto the Phase 1. So this is, again, is a continuation of the Phase 1 scheme in terms of palleted materials. You then go into parking layouts, and the red sets out, in effect, the off-street parking provision, and the green sets out an additional off-street parking provision, so they all meet the adopted standards. You've got storey heights, which indicate, in terms of, as I previously said, a varying degree of storey heights, with principally 2-storey towards the outer edges of the site, and you can see principally 2 storeys towards those buffer areas. And again, you've got 3 storeys along the main to promote that primary frontage, and again, to promote along here, to promote the community building along here. So it gives you that identity to the street and the wayfinding as you're going around the site. This I haven't included a lot of slides. This is part of the method statement that comes with the application, which sets out how they're going to protect the existing landscaping on the site in terms of to the BS standard, and what trees they're proposing to take out, and how they're going to protect these measures during the construction phase. So this is in the buffer area, and these are the attenuation ponds. Again, this is the landscaping detail. As I said, this is part of a landscaping. There's 5 of these, so I'm just including it for members' reference points. And again, this again shows the attenuation ponds and the landscaping that's proposed in those areas. And so, in terms of principles, I know I've sort of gone through very quickly in terms of what the application proposes. As I said, members aren't considering access. That was dealt with and is approved at the outline stage. They are considering appearance, landscaping, layout and design. The report sets out clearly that this does follow the principles of the illustrative master plan. It does follow the principles adopted by the Outline Permission. It does follow the principle in terms of the adopted H12 site allocation in terms of what it's seeking to achieve in that area, and a lot of those were secured as part of the outline consent. It does result in a high-quality development which increases biodiversity out of the site. It will result in the loss of those additional trees along this boundary in order to accommodate that attenuation, to incorporate the attenuation ponds. The report doesn't try to hide from that issue, but I think what I would draw members' attention in terms of looking at the application holistically and looking at the illustrative outline, the illustrative proposals as submitted as part of the application, you can see in terms of how the existing semi-natural spaces around the site are proposed to be retained, and also as we move to the latter phases, because let's not forget the overall outline consent, condition 21, secured a level of open space, a quantum of open space that the whole site needs to secure. So when we're looking at open space allocation, we're looking at to make sure that we incorporate that within the whole scheme. So overall, and bringing this to a conclusion, the officer's report considers this as a high-quality development which continues those principles established by the Phase 1 development. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We now turn to the public speakers, and it's always a pleasure to see Mr. Young. Mr. Young, if you'd like to come forward, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the committee. I'm here as an individual, and I've got quite strong opinions formed over the last 5 years since I've lived in Maidstone, and in particular for this site, which is the biggest one near my house, and it wasn't one that I expected to find in the condition that it's now in, and I'll come to that in a moment. Phase 1 was approved in December last year, and if I'm being generous, it's an unmitigated disaster from an environmental point of view. We have lost major chunks of woodland, and we have lost major elements of the ecology of this site already. So you will find I will concentrate on that element in my objections tonight. We've already heard on other sites where people are prepared to take measures to protect local and endangered species, things like bats and badgers, barn owls, nightingales, and we have all of those on this site. and yet there are no protective measures whatsoever, and we're well through phase 1. So most of the damage to the ecology is already happening, and this site is at the centre of many developments on Hermitage Lane, so it's centres where all of the previously disturbed wildlife has moved to this site. So it has contained something that was never in the original planning of consideration for this whole area. So we're still going to get more and more of this damage occurring because you've already heard they're going to be chopping out yet more trees. So modifications to trees by pruning and lopping and pollarding in what are TPO protected areas are considered to be totally against the principles of conservation of woodlands. The fact that they are protected by TPO is a formal recognition by experts employed by this council in NBC to preserve trees in places where the landscape has developed over many years to be as green and as verdant as it is. We are losing that. That part is irreplaceable. The houses will be there, but we will have lost the very thing that we all enjoy right now, which is the green space. So I will move on and say that the setting aside of the requirements for the convenience of laying out houses to suit the developer's purse. That's really what it's all about. He makes bigger profits out of a site that he can put more houses on, and he's doing away with the trees to achieve it.
Can you draw your remarks to a close, Mr. Young?
Well, planting new trees is not the answer to all of this. We have to make sure that we preserve as much of the original woodlands as possible. And I would implore you to place stringent conditions upon the developer to retain all the trees in the TPO areas and leave them untouched.
Thank you, Mr. Young. That's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Lewins, please.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I just wanted to mention that one of the main concerns for the existing residents is the bus emergency access being used as a rat run for new residents and visitors to the school and community hall. And I'm pleased to see that this has now been addressed by installing the lockable Kent carriage gap bollard. With regards to the wet ponds, it is good to see that there is biodiversity encouraged. However, I am concerned about the safety and would like to know what protective measures will be taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a point that's come up in my own area of Tovel more than once. It's all right. Councillor Willis is about to use it, I think.
Chair and members of the committee, this application originates, as most of you know, from an area of land which is on the edge of Maidstone, and it's the last bit of countryside in our border on that area, so it's very sensitive to local people. I think Keith, when he spoke, Mr. Young, hinted at that. However, it was also won by appeal and overruled by the Secretary of State. So we always work as hard as we can to get the best we can and work for local people. However, I have to say, in this part of the application, perhaps not latter parts, the developers worked extremely hard to try and listen to local members and make some adaptations. And there are things such as charging points in garages, an extra cycle lane with signage that they're looking at, and looking at with KCC 20 miles an hour near the school. All these things have been emailed to the officer today, things that we've negotiated with the developer. My question is, not immediately, but the question is, how do we get them written into this so they happen? Do we need you guys to agree them as informatives or I don't think conditions, but I don't want to lose them, and so it's good. The second thing, which is a bit more negative, is that in relation to phase 1, which Keith, Mr. Young also referred to, there is a lot of concern in the local area about the size of the ancient woodland that's been chopped away. Now, I'm personally, actually, I'm going to believe actually they may have done the right thing, but I'm asking the officer as well if we can actually get a proper review with our arboricultural department. I think that's the correct, wonderful arboricultural department, to do a proper review, so you perhaps to back that, so residents can clearly see what was in the woodland inventory, what the developer put forward in the appeal that the government ruled, and what is actually on the ground. And that would give residents confidence that they haven't actually had woodland taken away. It shouldn't have been, ancient woodland. And if it is true that they have taken woodland away, then we can ask for some kind of land compensation from the developer. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll leave that with you guys to discuss.
Thank you, Councillor Willis. Always interesting. Right, is anyone indicating to speak at this point? I think I may have seen Councillor Harwood, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh, it was Councillor Wilby.
Okay, I'll go first. I think the critical point here that I know that the local ward members have been working very hard is to ensure those fragments of semi-natural land which survive the experience of the housing estate being built, that they are actually connected. Because if these fragments are kind of disconnected, then they will be of no value to wildlife, the local residents or the landscape. I think we're kind of getting there. However, when you go out on site and you see some of the access roads and you see the new bus connection lane that's going through, it does rather bisect and disconnect the peripheral areas, semi-natural areas. However, that's pretty much a done deal, because you're not going to get land bridges or underpasses or anything because it's already there. I mean, what I would really kind of reiterate the point that was made by the objector, Mr. Young, that undertaking some survey activity in that general area is just the lack of biodiversity now, and that includes within urban Allington as well. When I was doing some counts of butterflies and moths, and it was noticeable how genuinely the most impoverished area in the whole of Maidstone Borough was that Allington, Tunbridge and Malling boundary. And I think there's reasons for that. I think where you have got open space, the management is very intense, it's very intensively managed, and you are seeing a lot of habitat destruction. So I think hopefully, if you look at the conditions, we've got all our normal conditions around cordwood and gaps under fences and so on, and swift bricks and so on. I think we've done what we can. I think what is really important is the maintenance of these connected areas as we go forward. And interestingly, I was just talking to one of the planners about this, that very often you get contract managers come in there and you have ecological management plans, you have conditions saying that we're going to leave this area for nature, and it's going to, but that doesn't survive contact with the contract maintenance team who go in there, stream and flatten the whole place to a bowling green, and then they maintain the trees on about kind of 3 cuts to kind of knee height every year. And essentially you've got a wasteland which within a few years becomes like all the monotonous, sterile, municipal dreariness that we've got all around the borough of closely mown grass with kind of dead twigs that have been ring-barked by strimming. So I think what I'm trying to say is we might be all right for 5 years of this management, but how do we ensure, now that Maidstone Borough Council will not take land on, now we ensure it stays with contractors who don't, frankly, just want the cheapest possible approach, quickest and cheapest way round. It is damaging this borough, and it's Maidstone Borough Council's fault because we will no longer adopt land. If we adopted this land, we could have it in perfect condition like we have all over the borough where we took the land on. I don't know how we overcome it. I mean, perhaps it is a trust where the Borough Council and other stakeholder interest groups locally have the whip hand. But I am very worried if we leave it with the management company for the developer, that it will not, we will not realise the vision.
it's quite interesting. We'll come back to that in a moment or two. Councillor Wilby.
Well, Councillor Harwood stole most of my points I was going to bring up anyway. So, but from meetings with James Willis already. The thing I would ask is the area that is going to be the stud basins and the new woodland and the wildland meadows and all the rest of it, that actually be set up in conjunction while they're building this next phase. I know they've said they're going to bring their new LEMP forward, but what measures are we putting in to control that and actually check that they are doing that? Because obviously, as we've heard, if they are doing that LEMP, clearly they've not been doing the tree protection that they should have been doing. They've not been preserving the stuff they should have been preserving, and we've already missed a bit already. So could I just have some assurance that the tree protection officer, and the enforcement team are actually going to go out and make sure that the crowd aids are doing what they should be doing? And on the concerns about the land, I'd like to reiterate this as well, that I have huge concerns about a management company doing this. It's all right when you first move into a place, being told you've got a management company, but three people down the line after that house is sold, you find it very hard to get that money off the residents. And we know this from places in Tovel, in the South Ward, all over, that literally 15 years on a line, we could actually get this handed over to us in a really bad state. So I don't know if there's some method that we could possibly take this on, possibly the same way that maybe other places have introduced a precept for certain things, which then the local residents and local members and parishes could sit on.
Could you also, when you come back, Mr Bailey, address the safety issue that's raised by Councillor Lewins about the ponds, please?
I'll start on that first, if I can. If I could draw members to page 143, condition 4F. That requires details to an Ordnance Data Unum level in and around the attenuation basins, together with measures to protect public safety. So that would need to come forward as part of the approval of the conditions to deal with the safety matter for the attenuation ponds. Regarding the tree protection measures, obviously I've got here the Deanne Cunningham, who sort of leads the Heritage Landscape Design team. I've been out on the site numerous occasions with Nick Lewington, who's the Horticultural Officer, and we went out and inspected when the protection measures were put in place for the ancient woodlands. NAGs, who are here, Mr Young represents, and Mrs Pelletti over there, will know that I've been out on site with the councillor, Mr Willis, Councillor Willis, and the NAGs group, and I've walked around that site specifically. So I've been out there 3-4 times with the horticultural officer myself, with him, as arising from complaints from the NAGs group, and I've been out on site on a visit with NAGs and Councillor Willis. So I've been out on site on numerous occasions to look at the issues, and we were satisfied that Crowdace were complying with the terms of their conditions, and they're setting out requirements as set out by the horticultural statement. So they may not agree, the Residents' Association, with me, but I am satisfied, having been out there on numerous occasions, that they are complying with those conditions. Moving forward to the LEMP provisions, which I didn't say in my presentation, is that Section 106 requirements require them to submit a LEMP provision. Now, the applicants committed at the Phase 1 scheme to bring forward the management of the ancient woodland, Bluebell Wood, as part of Phase 2. They've committed to that, and you'll know in the papers as set out in the report that that has all been agreed by the consultees, by KCC Biodiversity, by the landscape team. So in place, that's not forming part of this application. It is a requirement of the Section 106, but they've brought that forward. So there is the commitment that they are bringing forward management of the ancient woodland, because I didn't want those matters, people living on the site, without some kind of management of the ancient woodland coming forward. So there is that consistency coming forward from the developer, and they have, if I'm honest, have done most of the things I've requested them to do, and I am keeping a very close eye in terms of how the site is moving forward. With regard to the management company, well, I appreciate the concerns, but that is unfortunately how how everything is moving forward with councils not adopting this land. And notwithstanding that, that was all set out in the Section 106 agreement. So the issues about who manages the land is all set out and clearly clarified in the 106 agreement. I know Councillor Willis is trying to do a lot of work and has had lots of discussions with Mr Kerry, who's the MD of CrowdAce. So discussions are still ongoing with Councillor Willis about the issues about the management. But when we talk about management of this site, we are talking about this whole area. So we're not just talking about one specific pocket, we are talking about this woodland, all the boundaries, semi-natural open space. We're talking about the community centre, the open space back here. We're talking about the orchard here. So these are all parts of the management company that require financing. So we've got to look at it holistically in a whole, and that's what we have been looking at, because it's a strategic allocation. So I'll just ask members to bear that in mind, that we are looking at quite a large, substantial site, and you'll know by Condition 21 and the policy, 12.95 hectares of open space which is being delivered around the site. So it's not an insignificant amount of space, and it requires a lot of management. So hopefully that covers the 4 points that you've raised.
Just a point of clarification. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilby.
So, partly, but my concern was 15 years down the line, how does that still get enforced? When we know this issue arises when people move in that then don't pay the contributions to the management company. So is that going to be enforced by the management company, or are we going to enforce that, or do we just end up with in 15 years' time, a woodland that's just overrun with brambles and in disrepair?
To answer your question, it is covered in the 106, principally because there was a concern around the whole issues about the management. So the enforceability and the breach of the Section 106 is a very strong thing. Now, obviously, the management company, I'm not going to sit in this room and say in terms of, we would have conversations with the management company, because clearly the LEMPers would have been signed up to and agreed to as part of the management company taking it on. It clearly sets out the requirements that they're required to do in each phase and in each particular area. So it's been broken down into phases. It's clearly set out in the LEMP provisions what they are required to do. And obviously, I'm not going to predict what will happen in the future, but that's why it's wrapped up in a Section 106. I don't think it's the right time to have discussions about the merits or not of a management company, because practically every scheme coming forward is run through a management company. But notwithstanding that, that has been settled as part of the outline consent, so that is not for consideration. Appreciate it's a concern. It's not a consideration for now.
Yeah, it's frustrating sometimes, isn't it? Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd echo what Councillor Wilby says about management companies. I don't particularly like them, if I'm honest, but Mr. Bailey's right. This is the way the world is moving at the moment, and we're just going to have to deal with that as best we can when schemes like this come forward. Look, as you know, Mr. Chairman, I've been sceptical about development down Hermitage Lane for a long time now, about the concept of it, but the inspector in 2015 made his decision, and we are where we are, and I think everyone accepts that now. And likewise, when we had the detailed application for Phase 1 back here, I think I raised some concerns there. In terms of the different phases of this development, strip it back to what we've got in front. I spent quite a long time looking at a lot of the plans online, and to be totally honest, this is probably the least objectionable of the phases which I can come up with. I think there's a suitable buffer, as has been mentioned, to Howard Drive. I think, provided we can get sort of some of the issues Councillor Harwood touched upon with regards, and it was mentioned by Councillor Lewins with regards to the pond area, that would be helpful as well. And though perhaps Phase 1, the detail of it, the layout, the scale, and so on and so forth, wasn't as I'd have liked, I feel that Phase 2 fits in with what's been agreed already in Phase 1. And ultimately, if our aim here is to create communities in which which we want people to live, and communities which sort of have a bit of cohesion with each other, albeit being considered under different phases, I think this establishes. I think this meets that criteria, really. So with that in mind, and I can't say I ever thought I'd do this for an allocation on Hermitage Lane. I'd be happy to move the recommendations as are on the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Wilby, were you seconding? Do you wish to speak again now or reserve your right? Right, we move on to Councillor Mumford.
We tend to rely on Councillor Harwood for all our advice on badger flaps and leaving fences open and swift bricks and everything else. But there's one area that this whole project begs, in my mind, and it's something we miss so often, where you've got long flight or hunting flight lines, owl boxes. We never put them up, and we miss that opportunity every time. And if you look at this whole area, the public speaker reminded me of it, it's screaming out for owl boxes. And while we're putting swift bricks in and flaps for badgers, can we put some owl boxes in somewhere on this scheme?
Well, Councillor Wilby, as you know, as chairman of Hale Park Nature Reserve, you've been putting in owl boxes, so would that be welcome to you?
Yeah, I believe probably the area where the orchard and the school play area is going to be would probably be one of the best areas, because they need an open area to actually go onto first of all. I know James, Councillor Willis is in contact with the developer. I can suggest that Red Bow Valley Partnership, which build the owl boxes, they're only £90. I'm sure that the developer would not stretch into £90 for installation and an owl box.
Well, I can't say I'm an expert in terms of owls, but I'm happy to go along with what people who know more about this than me suggest.
I'll bear that in mind. Right, Councillor Prendergast.
I can answer that. As you know, the local planning inspector looked in some detail at Hermitage Lane. I remember Helen Grant MP coming along, and there was a bespoke session on air quality. All I can say on this particular site, and Mr. Bailey can enlarge on this, but as I understand it, the appeal inspector did look at air quality, because the main generator of air pollution is nitrogen dioxide from all the vehicles in the area. And as you alluded to, Councillor Prendergast, on both sides of the administrative border. So if Mr. Bailey could just go over the sort of headlines of the Section 106 heads for the outline application that was permitted at appeal. I think there was certainly a contribution for public transport, if I remember correctly.
I mean, I could go through those details. Mr Jarman is perfectly correct. There was almost £500,000 contribution towards the circular bus routes. But notwithstanding that, I would draw your attention to the policy in terms of point 13 of the policy and the provision of the open space allocation, because when this was considered, there was an air quality assessment carried out as part of the outline permission, which was presented to the public inquiry. Some of these people here in the audience were there at the public inquiry, so it was considered in quite a lot of detail. But remember, in terms of when you're looking at air quality, you're also looking at mitigation measures that the development can mitigate against the air quality issue. So in terms of the open space that's coming forward, in terms of the conditions that were put forward by the Inspectorate, condition 19 is set out on page 147 of your report. These measures were looked at together with the contributions that were secured as part of the Section 106 agreement, unless you want me to go into those details. They were considered in a lot of detail at the outline consent. The developer will need to comply with the terms of those conditions on that outline and still need to pay those contributions coming forward. So it was considered at the outline consent.
Yes, of course.
With regard, as I said, when this was considered at the outline stage, which is the principal planning permission, this is a details pursuant to that principal permission. That was considered. I accept case law, Client Earth has moved forward on there. The Inspectorate, not only that, it was the Secretary of State who made the decision on this scheme, considered air quality and considered the mitigation measures that were coming forward as part of that issue. And that's what was secured through the Section 106 and the conditions. And the Secretary of State considered that air quality was adequately mitigated for in this instance, not only through design measures as part of this scheme, but also through mitigation and contribution measures, and towards also management and compensation towards the ancient woodland. So those matters were considered in the round. I accept there's a new case law decision, but those matters were considered through the outline permission, and this is a details pursuant to that outline permission, so it is the reserve matters. So I would strongly encourage members that they were considered in the round when the decision was made.
Yes, that's quite right. Unfortunately, although if we were doing the outline consent now, or if the Secretary of State were doing the outline consent now, he would probably have done it somewhat differently. But we can't go back and rewrite history on a details pursuant application, however much we would like to. Having said that, Councillor Willis has been working quite hard to actually try and get additional mitigation. I've got you, Councillor Butler, on site. And in relation to the electric charging points, which are never, despite some people scoffing on the subject, are actually quite significant. Would that fall under condition 19, or do we need to incorporate it further as an additional informative on the recommendation, or would that automatically fall as part of the delivery of this condition on the outline?
I think in terms of 19 is looking at energy supply, so if you were looking at provision of electric charging points, that would need to be an additional condition that you would need to add if that's something that members, or you just add an additional condition to say that, you know, what I would request is I delegate that to me, because I'd need to consider in terms of where, what the numbers were. Is it each dwelling? Is it a certain number? Is it a certain provision? So it's certainly something that's reasonable. and I think that has been raised with Mr Willis and the Managing Director. So I think in principle he is perfectly willing and acceptable to go down that route, and it's something that members could impose.
Well, having said that, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Will.
Look, hey, on the basis we're all having electric cars by 2040, yeah, absolutely. I think we'd be missing out if we don't.
Fine, that's agreed then. But as far as the mover and seconder are concerned, Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. It's something that's been in the back of my mind really since we've looked at some of the other larger developments. At which point do we see the detail of the parking areas and the roadsides? Is it in the hard surface materials, the proposed road offer adoption? Where exactly do we find out? Because in some of the developments that we've seen, and I know we're going to be going on a visit to look at some of these, and I will be asking for this one to be, I won't say it out loud, but some of the reasons for the scattered parking not being where people are able or should be parking in nominated parking areas is the lack of raised curbs sufficiently high, not just ordinary curbs, but these concave ones. Where do we see where they're going to, because those curbs aren't going to stop anybody, certainly not in their 4x4s. But I really do think, where do we actually say we need to stop people going onto these areas where plantings are, where we're encouraging growth of the planting and the landscaping? When do we say that's not right? I haven't seen anything yet, or is it hidden in the bits I just mentioned?
Right, Mr Bailey, can you lead us to the right part? Because I'm sure there was reference there.
There is a condition that I'm just finding out where that is, that deals with that particular matter. Just finding out where it is.
While Mr Bailey is finding that, Councillor Butler, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a small point. Has there been or is there going to be an archaeological survey, or is it to be a desktop investigation?
I think you can.
Yeah, that was secured as part of the outline consent. There's, as I said, on Appendix A, sets out in terms of the requirements, and that is still a requirement that the applicant would need to discharge formally through that. So that has been submitted as part of the Phase 1 scheme, because that was the particular area of concentration, and that was considered under those matters under the Phase 1. But as I said, discharge of outline consents is separate in a way to the reserve matters application. They still need to get the details discharged for the outline consent. And with regard to the condition requirement, condition 5 on page 143, details to prevent measures to prevent parking on landscaped amenity areas shall be submitted to. So, you know, it is a concern that was raised on the Phase 1. It's a continuation of that concern. But the reality, in terms to answer your question directly, that layout, whilst the outline accepted the access to the site right adjacent to the reservoir, that layout design is secured through KCC on a 278 agreement. So in terms of the actual exact detail to that specification, that then becomes the responsibility of KCC, who then adopt that road for those purposes.
Are we able to give them a hint as to what we, along the lines of what Councillor Cox was saying?
Not as such. I mean, this is all part of the Section 38 process, so the curbing provided would need to be in accordance with our adoptable standards. And I think that's as much as I can say, really.
I think that was a no. I thought it was a no, but okay.
In which case, I'd like to say that we protect the areas that we are landscaping with curbing of appropriate size, that you cannot come off of the roads that are there unless they are shared and designated as shared areas. So there is no defined curb or path. because it's not working very, very near the police headquarters area.
Just to give you concern, this road, when we were looking at the Phase 1 scheme... No, I know that. When we were looking at the Phase 1 scheme, this road was designed to accommodate on-street parking. So specifically, this is adjacent to where the school is, so this is kind of a good detail. It's pulled in so you can actually accommodate on-street parking. It's purposely designed, and as you go into this new development, there will be designated areas where you provide on-street parking specifically for that purpose. So there are clear areas with pull-outs that will have landscaping features within them, so you can protect those areas. So it was integral to the design of this scheme that you would accommodate on-street parking in those specific areas, so you would actually discourage those people having to mount, because the road layout has been designed to accommodate that in this scheme.
Sorry, so is that behind you a green hard standing? Or is that earth with green coming through and the ability to drive one's vehicle to mount the curb to drop Johnny off?
Yeah, but that integral to a road design would only occur if you didn't accommodate the ability for cars to park on the street. So if the road was so narrow that they had to mount the curb, this has been designed specifically to allow on-street parking in pull-off areas without having to mount the landscape area. So it is specific and integral to the design, whether members agree with that or with that or not, but that was integral to the design. So you actually do accommodate on-street parking on-street, and the roads are still wide enough to allow 2 cars to pass as well.
Sorry, a straightforward suggestion, not wanting to conflict with KCC highway standards, which are fairly rigid for good reasons, safety reasons. In the past, I can think of a number of schemes where we've protected landscape ecological areas by just requesting the developer to put in relatively low post and rail fencing so that cars can't go into those landscaped areas. And then you don't get into any kind of conflict with highway standards.
What we're in effect looking for is a beefed up condition 5, as far as I can see. And if we ideally it would be, we'd be stipulating sort of how high the curves would be. If we have to put in posts at certain points, as has been done. We've got a management company ultimately, and the management company would take on responsibility for if we put any posts in, perhaps as well. I don't know, but that happens well, exactly. But there's lots of options we can do here. I just think what we need to do is just make it very, very clear in the wording of condition 5 what we're seeking to do. Now, and I'm thinking that I don't want to make this on the hoof, so I'll take any sort of best suggestions that come from anyone, but instead of just asking for details of measures to prevent parking, can we perhaps say details of measures to prevent parking, and then add in what Councillor Cox was saying earlier about the specific parts of the scheme, as this is a detailed application, where we think that would apply to, if that makes sense. But that was...
Mr Bailey was commenting to me just before you indicated, Councillor Borton, that changing condition 5 would address that. But I think probably... and he's going to amplify that in a minute, I think.
I could just put, after prevent parking on landscape amenity areas such as low-level railings, and then shall be submitted to and approved in writing by. So it gives the applicant an idea of what you're seeking to achieve, and then we'd actually get the final detail, because there may be a better solution, but that addresses that point, hopefully.
Right, members, I'm going to move to a conclusion on this. Any further comments on amending conditions? Councillor Rowan.
I hate to put a fly in the ointment, but when you provide roads with parking facilities or access very close to a railway station, my village certainly has experienced that all roads therefore become public car parks because of train users. It's something that needs to be considered. And even when you do build a new pavement, people will still park on it.
Well, it may well be that in due course appropriate measures will have to be adopted to control that, but Councillor Round, that will have to be addressed, I think, other than through the planning process. It will require a traffic regulation order. Any comments, Councillor Mumford?
Very quickly, the condition that Mr. Bailey just amended, he spoke about barriers. Can he include the word wooden barriers? Because I've seen these metal scaffold poles and they look absolutely horrible.
Yeah, fine. Right. Any other suggestions? Is everyone clear on what's been proposed so far?
Perhaps on that very point.
Councillor Clark.
I think you mentioned low-level railings as an example. Perhaps post and rail would be a better. That would indicate something less urban.
Councillor Wilby. Yes.
Sorry, not to argue here. I did just say this with Matt. The problem with putting posts and railing, rather than just post, is if someone hits the post and rail, it drags the 3 bits of post actually out with it. So you have to replace the whole lot. If you just put posts in, or bollards in, one bollard gets taken out, you just press one bollard.
It's an example, not necessarily restrictive.
I know sometimes how prescriptive it can be. So.
I think we'd take that on board, but as it's an example, not necessarily the only possible solution. Right. Would you like to read back what we've got so far, Mr.
Just to take that in that's why I'd put it, the flexibility in the condition, but notwithstanding that. In terms of members requested, they've requested an additional condition RE electric charging points with delegation down to the head of planning to set out exactly what that level would be, and also amendment to condition 5, which will read, after landscaped amenity areas such as low-level wooden posts. That doesn't commit anyone, it's just a such as an example, and we've still got flexibility to deal with what would be appropriate when it comes forward. Those are the 2 changes that I've got. Sorry?
Bus owls. Owl boxes.
No. Can I just be clear? That was a suggestion by the councillor that might be more appropriate in phase 2A and not necessarily in this phase. So it's on the next application that I took that as coming as a potential.
You're quite right. It would be more appropriate. Councillor Clark.
I may have missed this, but did you mention charging points at the community centre?
We haven't got to that one yet, but we may well do. Right, members. We've run through that. That's been proposed and seconded. All in favour of the amended recommendation? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. That application is approved. We will now move on to the closely related application. 26, land to the east of Hermitage Lane, Maidstone, Kent, which is the community centre to application phase 2A.
Thank you, Chair. This is phase 2A. It's again a reserve matters for appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, comprising a community centre with associated infrastructure. There was a requirement on the outline planning permission. The outline planning permission contained details for a community centre, amongst other matters. It was a mixed-use application. Obviously, the policy suggests the location of that. The illustrative master plan that came forward as part of the outline application suggested the location where it was, that sitting adjacent to the school site was the best location on that, and that's obviously where the adopted policy H12 seeks to place that community centre in that location because it has a sort of a co-link with the school site. So, in terms of the application moving forward, I'll try to quickly run through a lot of the photographs you've seen. So you've got the byway, the community centre, so you've got the new road on the application that members have now resolved to approve coming down here, and at the end of that point you have the community centre here. So it becomes a focal point down the street and is located directly adjacent to the new primary school site, which will take up approximately this area here in the pear orchard. So this is the site in red. Part of the master plan, as I said, it was always envisaged to be in this location as part of that illustrative outline consent. This is the plan that you've already seen. So in terms of the detail of the school building, it's a high quality building in terms of a ragstone walling with yellow stock brickwork as well, standing seam roofs, as I'll go through that detail, but it becomes a principal focal point in the street. In terms of where it's located to the other side of these rows of trees, and again you have seen these photographs. I'll go through these approximate position of where it crosses the PROW. And it's just off to the right-hand side, but this is approximately the location where it crosses the KB47, the restricted byway. Obviously, concern has been raised by local residents regarding access, and I think, dare I say, to get to the critical points of this application, concerns were raised about the location from the NAGs and local residents, and principally about the crossing point from this restricted byway. Now, in terms of this is the application, and I'll move in terms of the solutions that have been put in place and agreed by Kent Public Rights of Way and KCC, which seeks to put, as Councillor Lewin's already raised, a Kent carriage gap. And I have a photograph of what that is, if you're not quite sure what it is. It's effectively a demountable bollard. And in effect what would happen is the key would be held by PROW that would allow access to Southern Water, and effectively that would then restrict, because there is a right for certain individuals to have vehicular access down that restricted byway. Now, one of those is public rights of way, to maintain the public right of way. The second one is South Eastern Water, who have access, as you've previously seen on that slide, to access the reservoir. So with a demountable, with a Kent carriage gap, and it's new to me, but I found something new, that effectively that would restrict vehicular access, and then it could be obviously unlocked and demounted. Sorry, you want me to get to it? Right. Oh.
Members are fascinated.
Right. So what this looks like, this is in its shrunken form, this is in its full form, and this is in its half form. So in effect what that is that shows all the various stages of what it is. So yes, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Various stages of demountable or not. So this is what the Kent Public Rights of Way and KCC Highways would require to be positioned. Now I'll move back to where... No, but as I said, members wanted an illustrative detail. This is coming from a website of roughly of what it would look like. So it's a demountable bollard. Right. So in terms of positioning, and I think that's where it becomes quite key, where it would be proposed to be positioned in this blue dot, you have got something on your papers here. So it would be positioned in this location here, when effectively, and you previously saw where the access, the pull-in access into the southeastern water reservoir here, so that would actually stop vehicular access coming down this particular. So anyone coming down the new road couldn't actually turn left and use that restricted byway. So that would be a cut-off provision. And also, as part of this, there are bollards here, wooden bollards in red on this plan here, which again are to concentrate cars going down into this position and obviously narrowing that gap and and trying to restrict and slow speeds down when they're crossing that restricted byway. So it gives that protection to those residents and walkers who are using this restricted byway. So those are some of the key messages that were coming out from the residents that they wanted to secure. And you'll notice on the conditions, those conditions do seek to secure those. And I think it's condition 11 goes into a lot of detail in terms of where they're shown on the plan on page 213 of your report. And that seeks where they're, if they're removed, if they're damaged, that condition seeks to require that they're not only provided before the development becomes operational, but it also seeks their replacement in the event of them being damaged. So that was a particular concern that was raised by residents that is addressed by this report and has the support of the statutory consultees. What I think is also very important to raise is a lot of effort went into the design quality, because I don't want members to forget, because obviously the whole concept of this building was integral to the community. So not only making it a visualisation point, a destination point for people to know, not tucked in some back corner, not an afterthought, but a forethought of the whole design criteria. So design quality, and I don't want to go into excessive detail, but a lot of thought has gone into this and a lot of attention has gone into this. So in terms of you've got your entrance, you've got your vaulted ceiling, you've got ragstone walling here that carries around the side of the building. You've got this single monopitched roof in terms of which the applicants have obviously said they're encouraging in terms of renewable energy, so it could be designed for that particular purpose. It's in the right angle location. You've got high quality standing seam upper levels to the front up here in terms of cladding, and also you've got a standing seam zinc roof. So in terms of quality materials, I don't think you could get a better quality material on a community building. So it's built for longevity, and let's not forget, this is all this requirement is at the developer's expense. In terms of the internal arrangement, again, a lot of thought has gone into the internal arrangement. It's multifunctional, it's got a creche facility, and not only that, a lot of care and attention has gone to the outside facility in terms of the LEAP provision, in terms of this Phase 2A, in terms of a secure area for users of this creche. You've got changing facilities, toilet facilities suiting both for the creche, both for this room, so they're all separate. So, the developer didn't need to go to that level. They were required as part of the 106 to provide a floor area. They've gone into a lot more detail in terms of this area. This is the lockable storage area that I know Councillor Willis has been trying to seek some negotiations to in terms of an additional door. So, in terms of you've got a lot of facilities within this room which will really make it have a longevity, and it will allow an income to allow this building to be sustained. So they are some quite important matters. You've got a leap in this area, an outdoor sort of play area, a key important part of the ecology again. This is the attenuation basin. So in terms of the detail coming forward, again, sort of integral, designed as a wet pond. You've got swales coming up the side here, linking into the attenuation basin. So as part of this application, the updated surface water strategy for this site was considered in a lot of detail, and about how you could improve biodiversity in the site. So again, you get sort of linkage, and this is the public open space area here. So again, I know there were concerns about the location of this site from the local residents, but I think the indication in the policy is this is the good location. The illustrative master plan showed it is a good location. There is natural synergy with the school in terms of access and footpaths linking the school site here with the community centre and the creche. There's good parking, 35 parking provisions on site. The developers have thought about lighting, the sensitivities of lighting. They've thought about preventing people accessing potentially this new square area here with lighted bollards. And I've got a lighting plan. I'm kind of being told I've got to move on. But a lot of care, this is the lighting plan, but what I'm trying to show is in the phasing plan for Phase 2, this a lot of care and attention has been thought by the developer how to make the development safe, not putting all these barriers in place everywhere, but try to make the development safe by design, and that has come out in the thought process through here. And as I said, I'm not having enough time to go through all the minute details, but you know, car parking strategy, traffic in terms of tracking diagrams, the vehicle refuse and the vehicle refuse areas here. You know, sensitive lighting, so you hug it close to the building so you don't splay the lighting, and these have all got restrictors on them. So in terms of you're not putting lighting out into the outer areas, but containing it around the parking area in the building. And then the landscaping detail for the attenuation ponds. As I said, it sets out in detail there. So retention of existing boundary treatment, again, along the restricted byway. So a lot of care, thought and attention has gone into phase 2, and I think you'd be glad to hear that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Right, we move now to public speakers. Mrs. Pelletti, New Allington Action Group, please.
We strongly object to the proposed access road to the community centre. There is already a primary access to 500 new homes from Hermitage Lane, which crosses over a pedestrian right-of-way. This application requests a second separate road crossing over the same restricted byway. This will mean the footpath is dissected by 2 major roads. There has recently been a serious near-miss accident between a construction vehicle and pedestrian, and last week a dog was hit. If this road is allowed, the safety of local residents will be at risk. We must assume that at least 1,000 more cars and delivery vehicles will be using these roads daily, and local authority will not adopt for many years to come. It also means that unauthorised use of the pedestrian right-of-way is perfectly possible. Motorbikes and cars are already doing this. By allowing this road to the community centre, it will create a dangerous shortcut. The fact that highways have requested bollards to the footpath is not reassuring, and it will penalise the disabled because wheelchairs and mobility scooters will no longer be able to use this important route. There were bollards in place at the Howard Drive end of this public right-of-way, but they were removed so as not to disenfranchise the disabled. Please ask Mr. Bailey to indicate clearly to the committee the entire length of footpath KB 47, so you may appreciate the health and safety concerns of local residents. I cannot emphasise enough how busy and essential this pedestrian route is. It is a main footpath to the hospital, used daily by commuters walking to the station, by school children, dog walkers, cyclists and disabled elderly residents. On appeal, no objection was raised to having the access to a new school directly off the primary road to the estate. We can therefore see no reason why a new dedicated road cannot be shared from this area and used by both the school and community centre. It would be a much safer option to access both from Hermitage Lane, especially since the land is in the ownership of the developer. This huge multi-purpose community centre with 2 halls, creche and 35 parking spaces will no doubt be the cause of unacceptable noise. It will be used between 7 a.m. and midnight and is located very close to existing houses in Allington Way. This is a residential area of mainly bungalows owned by elderly residents. Respect for the local community has been completely overlooked, and we urge this committee not to approve this application until a more suitable access is forthcoming. Thank you.
Mr. Young.
Good evening, Chairman, again, and committee. Well, I produced my speech notes completely separate and distinct from those that you've just heard. However, you will find a large amount of parallel thinking. The prime cause of a resident's concerns relate to access to and from the community hall in this Phase 2A development. It now relies on yet another break in the byway used by pedestrians and regular users to and from the hospital in Hermitage Lane, as well as commercial offices for people that work on the opposite side of Hermitage Lane at the Gallagher's quarry entrance, or near the Gallagher's quarry entrance. We've got development there which is not part of Maidstone's provision, but nevertheless people from Maidstone work there. I deviated from my written word, sorry. Hermitage Lane, as well as commercial offices down it. There we go. Without monitored traffic, it's not very safe. If you don't monitor the traffic that's using it, you're going to finish up with an unsafe situation. And we're very concerned that the bollards that have just been mentioned don't actually deal with the whole length of that byway, only certain sections within the confines of the thinking of Crowdace. Going towards the south, it also needs protection for the same reasons as you've probably put them in the northern section. So if the access were given to this community hall from the main access road going round behind the school site that is yet to come forward, then you would obviate the need for all of the traffic associated with the community hall from running through the estate. That would enhance the safety aspects for all the residents who live there, as well as preventing people using the byway, for the reasons that's already been stated, from having all that traffic to contend with too. Okay, so all users along the new development can easily walk to the community hall. You do not need to encourage them to use their cars. You do not need to provide them with huge car parks either, right? Because you're encouraging people to use vehicles to come to a place which is within walking distance of everybody that needs to use it. So moving the car park to the rear of the development, with the new road coming off of the main access road, Hermitage Lane access road, would also encourage people to go away from
Can you bring your remarks
through
to a close,
the
please,
development itself. Yeah, okay, I'll finish there because I'll be going over other ground that people have already covered.
Thank
but
you
I'm
very
sure
much.
you get the point. We're very concerned about safety issues, and I don't think they've been adequately addressed.
Thank you. Councillor Willis, please.
Chair and Committee, thank you. I've every confidence that the bollard issue will be covered by you. I do think it's an issue that I don't quite understand why there aren't bollards as you come up the main access road to the right, because that could lead to people driving down the byway. And that byway is used as a commuter route. It is a cherished old route that is used and should be kept as that, and that's been agreed in the outline. So more work perhaps on protecting both ways. The most important thing is that this, remembering this is an area, I think the word is coalescence or anti-coalescence, this is the edge of Maidstone. We're trying to keep some countryside in this area. We have the woods, which Councillor Hall will probably tell us about how it deregulate, will be ruined over time, but we're going to do our best. There is a lot of countryside to the left of this area. So the one thing I've asked of the developer, and again I'll ask the question that wasn't answered earlier, how do we get this put into the planning permission? The developer has agreed, and you may laugh at this, but you've all had an email from me, he's agreed to set up, have an office in the community hall that could be called an ecology office if someone decides to take it up, with a door with outside access. Don't laugh, Councillor Bolton. So meaning that you don't have to access the community hall for someone that may be working in the ecological area, so a group that may be looking after the area or whatever we end up with. What you just the officer described the name of the room was the multi-purpose hall stock room, could become an ecology room, which is a pointer to the future and future phases, how we can actually have to keep some countryside in this area, and a lock on the outside of the door. So I ask you, the officer, Mr. Bailey, I ask you to help us find a way that we can actually put that in writing, so that's agreed. You've seen an email today from the developer saying he'll agree to that. Generally speaking, the application, I do share the residents' concerns about access. One simple answer to access would be the point I made earlier on about signed cycle paths. If you look at the slide, Mr. Bailey, the slide when you go back where it showed the pavement, if I could just do this before I finish, the one which showed the pavement where Councillor Cox was kept pointing out, the one before, it was on the previous application. Yes, yeah, that'll do. The one showing the main road, showing the access road. That's it. On the other side of that road, so you have to imagine it, there is a large footway that the developer has agreed could be signed for. Again, it's on the email that the officer has agreed could be signed as a cycle route. So one way of overcoming the congestion problem is if we can put that in writing that we want that cycle route that he's offered, take up the offer of that becoming a cycle route, and that cycle route then go left into the byway. That gives people a way of accessing, by foot, of course, or by cycling, by accessing the community hall, which means they haven't got to go right the way round, and it prevents people having to drive, giving it a green travel strategy. So that bit of path there, just above Officer Bailey's head,
If you could draw your remarks to a close.
Yeah, that bit of path can be used as a cycleway, and it's been, we noted it when we were looking at the application, and the developers agreed it could be signposted. So could you consider that? And also, could we find a way of getting this ecology office put in place? Because believe me, if we do get someone to support it...
Councillor Willis, fascinating though it often is.
Thank you.
Councillor Lewins, please.
I appreciate the time's getting on, so I'll be as quick as I can. I wondered whether there would be any chance of having another Kent carriageway gap bollard at the other end where MR 459 is, 489, where it leads on to the restricted byway, so that traffic doesn't come on the MR 489 at all. It doesn't need to, because I think a lot of traffic will tend to do that to bypass the other bit on Hermitage Lane. Does that make sense? Because I'm not sure if I'm missing something here, because I'm wondering if there should be another bollard that's restricting. See there, I just want to go like this and open up the picture. It's not big enough, is it, Keith? But as you see where, what I'd like to have done is to have the restricted byway, have it even more restricted. So that it's... Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, the bit that comes... That's right, the bit that comes out into Hermitage Lane. Because I've got a feeling that when school children will be dropped off, they will come along that route rather than coming along the other main access on Hermitage Lane. Does that make sense?
I can understand the concerns, but members would have to consider, in terms of what's within the current application, you're considering an access which is going to come up through here, okay, and then what this does seek to do is stop anyone going left. You're starting to stray well outside the realms of this current application, trying to stop something that's already there now, that people, if they want to access on the Phase 1A, that's you're trying to retrofit something onto a scheme at a later date. Now, that is a restricted byway as you come down here. What this application is securing, as Condition 11 does, is to prevent anyone coming down this road and going left. And that was the key area. You'll be straying way too far outside the application details to secure a bollard up here, which, again, would have been something outside of the outline consent. That would be my view, because you're not within the red line boundary again. It's not something that KCC have requested. It's not something that Kent Public Rights of Way have requested. So you're trying to retrofit a problem that's not part of this application. This application deals with its own issue by stopping anyone turning left at this point here, because they will be coming up here. They shouldn't be coming down here. They'll be coming up. They'll be coming up, and you've seen the road and the size of the road and the pull-ins. This is where the school's going to be located. So if anything's going to do anything, they're going to try and come up here and then turn left. This would stop them.
Where's the application boundary on there?
There, up to that point. So this is what the application is about here. So this is the application, and in terms of what members are referring to in terms of these green corridor spaces, again, just trying to show you the plan, which shows you the link. Where is it? There. This is where you've got your green corridor. So the way I read it rightly from Mr. Young is that I think people are suggesting a separate access coming around here, with the car parking here switched to the back. Well, not only are you taking away your ecology value, your landscape value, you're introducing another road, you're taking away your corridor, biodiversity corridors. You've got an area here that's reserved as part of the 106 for the school. You're going to eat into the school, and I don't think that achieves, this way, you're stopping traffic coming here, you're encouraging people down the primary route, and you're encouraging people down what is now a focal street down to the community centre. So you are limiting what people can do in any case. I don't think you'll be wanting to encourage.
Can you indicate on that map where the boundary is, site boundary?
There. It covers along here, covers up to there, and it covers this area here, because this is a landscaping detail that's part of the application.
Yeah. Unfortunately not.
Yeah, my apologies. I had completely forgotten that was under the T&M bit, actually. Just one other quickie. I'm sure I saw that Keswick Drive was included under Section 106, and I wondered whether it is, because I couldn't see it in this plan, and I wondered whether it was under a different phase, perhaps. I know the Giddyhorn's covered for Section 106, and I had a feeling that Keswick Drive was too, but I can't see it in here, and I'm just unsure whether it's under a different phase, whether it went under phase 1 or...
You have now
exceeded by 3 minutes.
No,
Bye-bye.
No, you have now reached your time limit. So I'm just taking declarations of lobbying, please. Yes, we did. A long time ago, but we did do it. Declarations of lobbying. I was taking it. Right.
The Section 106 deals with the outdoor sports facilities and recreation contribution, and it sets it out as part of the outline consent for Giddyhorn Lane, for the play area and groundworks at Giddyhorn Lane. But let's not forget this application also seeks to provide a LEAP, a local area action play area, right next door, well, right within the application site, within this area here. So that's a purposely designed LEAP for children from 2 up to 6, 7 age group, which is quite well located in terms of the community facility.
Sorry, you can't speak from back there. Councillor Wilby, please.
Okay. Yeah, obviously the design is quite high quality, as you pointed out there, Mr. Bailey. However, I'm a bit concerned about the woolly words of the possibility of solar panels and green energy. Why is there not a condition on it, or why is it not in the plan?
Why only an informative?
Yes. So I'll go from a point. So that's the first one. Obviously, we mentioned the charging points possibly in the previous plan application. Obviously, I know there's issues behind that, but maybe there could be a thing of a charging point for staff parking. Obviously, it's a bit harder to regulate for visitor parking because then who pays for it? The ecological room, or the storeroom, I am aware that in phase 1, there is a community orchard, which obviously is meant to be run by the community. So the community would need somewhere to store said tools and to preserve said orchard. So obviously I'd like that to actually go in as a condition that a room does get put aside for storage of tools, for maintaining ecological areas around the site and further development. Obviously, as also Councillor Willis pointed out, the offer as a cycle route around the outside and the extra pedestrian thing is only a good thing. Obviously, if you talk about mogul shift, and so I'd like that possibly added to it. On the parking bays, 35 does seem a bit excessive, but then knowing the community centre down there where I live, it's just been built. In peak times, when people come to pick kids up from the creche and the rest of it, you will need those 35 spaces, because otherwise they'll be parked on the street and across the byway and just causing a load of issues. So I'd say it would stay, and also the owl box, as mentioned in the previous application, that Medway Valley Partnership be contacted and an owl box be placed around said application.
Okay, before we go any further, I'd hoped that we would finish the community centre reasonably quickly, but we're clearly not going to, as quite a number of members have indicated, and there's some significant discussion going to take place. Therefore, those people here for the remaining applications this evening. Sorry? I know that, Mr. Bailey. I am intending to take, or try and take, Valley Drive Lewes this evening, but I don't think we're going to be able to take Brooklands, Headcorn, 18, or item 17, Bungalow at Hillview, Yelstead Road. It's just not going to be possible. It's 10 past 10 already, and so, I will not rush through an application in 5 minutes, which is what we will be at risk of doing. So I'm terribly sorry, but yes, I'm sorry, but we can't just predict sometimes how long it's going to take. So items 18 and 17 will not be heard tonight. Right, sorry. Councillor Bolton, please. I'm taking Councillor Bolton, then we'll come back.
To be honest, I've not really got much to add apart from what Councillor Wilby said. He's addressed most of the points I'd written down. Look, the solar panels, I think, should be a standard sort of condition on anything like this, to be honest, because we know how difficult it is to get solar panels when we don't put them on when we're building stuff. Anyway, so we may as well make the most of them. Yeah, what Councillor Wilby said, really. I'd love to have seen an 11-a-side football pitch there, but I wouldn't I? But we haven't got one. So, but yeah, I just echo everything you said, really.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, would you like to come back on this point?
I'd like to be able to say yes to all of them, but I'm going to have to go back individually, because the solar panel issue, I don't disagree at all. We have to, condition 19 of the outline consent is a very relevant, and it goes back to what I said previously, that it says before development of each phase, a scheme to secure at least 10% of energy supply. So they're going to have to comply with those requirements anyway. They've indicated in the design access statement that it's well designed and it could have solar panels on that roof because it's particularly designed, but that would be dealt with as part of that outline and discharge of that outline condition. With regard to the issues of conditioning the signs on the road. Well, this is not part of this application because, the cycle signs and the use of the cycle lanes that Councillor Willis was referring to, that is on the road, which is not part of this application. That was secured as part of the outline. Yeah, I'm just being... See, this...
I'm sorry, Councillor Willis. You can't really conduct...
This is part of the sort of the ecological corridor that links down to that site. So, in terms of the cycling, in terms of access, you've got that, and you've got that massive wide... Okay? In terms of lockable store and the issue of having that door, well, there is an application in design. As that comes forward, I can understand what Councillor Willis and how hard he's been working on that. That could come forward as a non-material change to the application to say that they want to put a door in. We wouldn't have any objection to it, but as those designs come forward, and also the lockable store issues, again, you know, when the management come on board and how that area is used, those could all be dealt with. So, personally, they're all very worthy of merit. Whether they actually need to be included in the current scheme, because they could be dealt as the whole design ethos moves forward towards a building regulations approval and everything else. Because this building needs to be built and operational before the occupation of the 400th dwelling. So they're required to submit it before 75th, which they have done, and it's required to be built and fitted out before 400 units. So, you know, there's quite a way to go forward when I think there's only about 6 or 8 houses currently being built on the site. So we're quite a way through that stage. So all these things could be accommodated as we move forward. I could recommend a formative, if that would satisfy members, to say, you know, the applicant should be strongly encouraged to look at a door design on the back and a store.
I think from what's being said that we should add that.
I'm quite happy to go for the informative section.
Councillor Harwood, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The point about the renewable energy, I don't really quite understand, because this is a specific building. We talk about 10% overall schemes and so on, but this will be an energy-hungry building, which will probably be looked after by, residents group and management, and we should make it efficient from the off. I don't quite understand the policy argument that was made about this building, because it's not a house, it's a community facility. I think that we should just state that it should incorporate renewable technology, and I'd be prepared to move that we did. Looking at the detail of the landscaping scheme for the wet balancing pond behind this centre, it's a bit odd. I mean, it essentially just shows a big area of just amenity-type grass with some very big parkland-type trees in it. It's got some beeches and some oaks and a few silver birch around the end, and they just seem to be disembodied. So if it is supposed to have some ecological value, I wonder why a similar approach as has been used to the ponds near Howard Drive has not been used, where they've identified little kind of enclaves of shrub planting to provide cover, where they've put in log piles and so on are identified. Why is this just a big square of grass with a pond plonked in the middle of it? I don't quite understand. So I suggest that we should stipulate within the conditioning that there are some blocks of shrub planting comprising, I won't say that, Rhamnus cathartica, Purging buckthorn, Viburnum opulus, which is Gelder rose, Salix caprea, which is goat willow, and Corylus avellana, which is hazel, and that we incorporate at least 3 log piles into this site. And then you will have the cover so that if we get amphibians and things, they actually just won't get eaten by birds.
And don't forget the owl boxes.
I thought the owl box was going to go into the orchard, wasn't it?
I was told it was on this application, so we...
Yeah.
Can I just clarify the owl box thing? This area is screaming for it. Now, I'm not suggesting that we put an owl box up against a community hall. I'm saying the whole project, somewhere in that project, and we should take expert advice of where to locate them, and they may not be here. But mine was a general point for the whole project.
Please, very quickly, yes.
My suggestion was that on this application, for condition that Medway Valley Partnership are contacted about install an outbox on the site, because obviously they're the experts that can tell us where to put it. Not myself, not any of us around this table.
Oh, yeah.
The reason I say that, Chairman, is because, of course, my point is what we can't do is can't. While there may be a better place for an owl box somewhere else, surely we can only determine what's in the red line boundary of the actual application that we're determining at the moment.
Yeah, well, we raised the issue before, and I was told by the officer that the owl box related to this application, so that's why I mention it now. Now, if we move that aside if it doesn't, but I can't see why we can't put it in. Councillor Harwood, you're...
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. Through you, I was just trying to clear up with Councillor Mumford which species of owl are we talking about? Because if it was a little owl, you might get a little owl box somewhere around there, and they might go in there. Yeah, even a tawny at a push, but no self-respecting barn owl's going to go anywhere near a community centre, is it?
Okay, look, enough about this. It was a well-meant suggestion. We'll see if we can incorporate the appropriate action. If not, we won't. But we'll see what we know. Now, Councillor Prendergast, you've been very patient. We must turn to you now.
Key answer is, the issue is that as part of this application and as part of a key area of concern to prevent access going left, it is a legitimate use of a planning condition and meets the tests that you can secure its provision. So in terms of what Condition 11 seeks to do, the issue is a notification to South East Water that you're going to block up what they have a right of access. So, you know, it's effectively a duty of Crowd Ace to notify Southern Water that's what they're going to do, and actually this is how you're going to gain access to it. If you need to gain your emergency vehicles, a key will be held with KCC Public Rights of Way, or maybe they may have a key. Well, I said, I take the words from KCC Public Rights of Way. The issue is that it's a duty to let them know, and actually how can they access their right, because they have an as of right to use the restricted byway. So I don't think Condition 11, it's a requirement to show that if it's damaged, we can put it back. And it's put in place before they occupy the community building. Just going back to the last question on renewable energy, I know where members are going from. I suppose the difficulty that I was trying to say to Councillor Harwood is that measure has been secured as part of the outline, and you don't duplicate a condition in a reserve matters that's already put on the outline consent. So the outline consent dealt with the renewable. I can see where the condition is set out on your papers on page 147. Oh, sorry. No, it's actually contained on 217. So in terms of the actual detail, you know, as I go back to, the outline is the primary consent. This is a details pursuant to a reserved matter. So what you would be doing is, in effect, conflicting with the outline consent. But, you know, if I'm honest, if I could have delegated authority to secure that, because, you know, the two would be saying two different things, wouldn't they? So if you require it to do it, I'll be then conflicting with the outline consent, because this is a phase. That's a sub-phase of an original two-phase. So if I put to say the building shall have renewable energy on its roof, I can say that, but it's got to comply with the terms of the outline consent. So I'll just, if I could just make sure, with agreement with the agent, that I've delegated authority to. I know what you want to secure. You want to get renewable energies on that roof. The applicant says they would like to do that. They say it in their DAS. I will work out how I can get that into the condition without conflicting with the outline requirement.
Right, that's helpful. But members are wanting to speak. Would they please indicate? Councillor Clark.
Very, very briefly, I just the whole notion of this being distinct to other properties on the development, in that it could affect the viability. If we can make it where the energy is as low as it can be, the viability is a more viable opportunity for anyone that's operating that community centre.
As I said, I know where members want. They want renewable energy on the roof, and I'll make sure I can put it on without conflicting with the outline consent. If you can give me that authority, I'll know what you want.
Okay, members, we have that assurance. Councillor Harwood, the point about landscaping, you want to take that forward in any...
I've written it down.
We've got that. Would you like to have a look at it? Right, members, we are getting very close to 10:30. I think we can certainly conclude this one, so can I have your permission to go beyond the 10:30 finishing point? Thank you. Right.
Councillor Harwood, could I get an amendment to condition 3 then, on page 211, which would deal with, and I'll incorporate those issues within a much enlarged condition 3.
I think members might be interested to know, so if you wouldn't mind, can you...
Well, the condition the amended condition 3 would landscape condition to incorporate shrub planting blocks adjacent to the wetland attenuation pond near the community centre, comprising buckthorn, goat willow, golden rose and hazel, gelder rose, and incorporate 3 cordwood piles adjacent to the wet attenuation pond. So in terms of how I'll have to adapt that into condition 3 and see how we can secure that, but I'm sure I can work something out.
Okay, members, we've got 2 amended conditions. We've got the 2 informatives about the door and the store. Have I missed anything? Right, in that case, I think that's concluded every suggested amendment. I will therefore move towards a vote unless anyone else has anything to say. All those in favour of the amended... It has been, but I'll take it again. It was Councillor Harwood who proposed and Councillor Wilby who seconded. But thank you. Those in favour, please indicate. I think that's everyone. But just to check, anyone against? Abstentions? No, that's passed. Right, hopefully, if we are reasonably disciplined, we can do the application 21, page 136, Valley Drive, Lewes. Valley Drive, that one. Yeah, there was no way we were going to do the other two. I mean, I would have liked to, but fat chance. Sorry, we're going to have to push on with this one. Ashley, oh, good, we might finish it. Sorry, no offence, but he's a lot more succinct. Yeah.
Sam Humphrey. Right. An application at 56 Valley Drive for a first floor rear extension, which will include dormer windows set in sort of a single story building set in a large plot. The property is quite well screened to the rear. That's see, and obviously front elevation from the street set back quite away from Valley Drive. That's a street scene. There's a variation of bungalows and two-storey dwellings. That's the existing bungalow, which is obviously set over sort of one storey. And then this section here is the element subject of the application. The conservatory and the side extension here were approved under permitted development. And I think you may recall the porch that went to the committee a few months ago. One of the highlights of that meeting, I think.
It was indeed.
So essentially, the issues are there was a previous appeal in respect of this of a first floor extension, which was dismissed on account of its scale. Since then, the extension has been reduced in size. It's understood the applicant has had pre-application advice from officers in respect of a similar scheme, and the view is it's overcome the previous reasons for refusal. It's set back considerably from Valley Drive, as you saw on the photos. It's set behind the dwelling. The use of materials is considered to fit well with the existing property, very well screened to the rear and in a large plot, and considered to relate to the host dwelling in an acceptable manner. In terms of impact on neighbours and amenity, obviously having regard to the screening and the separation distances, the officer was concerned with the western dormer, which he's suggesting is obscured glazed, which condition 4 will require to be obscured glazed and retained thereafter. So obviously the officer recommendation is approved subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Wynne. Right, Mr. Slocum, the objector. You've been very patient, sir. If you'd like to come forward.
This application for a first floor extension, if approved, would turn a low-level bungalow into a house and would be seen from the road. Over the past 12 years, there have been 5 applications to build houses at the end of Valley Drive. All applications have been refused by Maidstone Borough Council's planning officers, and 3 of the applications went to appeal and were dismissed by 3 separate government inspectors because of the height and being out of character with the low-rise 4.2 metre high bungalows which make up the majority of Valley Drive. In addition, the current owners have had 2 applications refused by Maidstone Borough Council officers, the last application being dismissed by a government inspector, and I quote, "On balance, the proposed development would cause significant harm to the architectural integrity of the host property and thereby the character and appearance of the wider surrounding area, contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework. The reasons for the past refusals still apply to this application due to the height and outer character. The side windows of the first floor extension would overlook the rears of number 54 and 41 Valley Drive, resulting in loss of privacy. Luce Parish Council have strongly objected to this application on the grounds of height and it being out of character with the adopted Luce Character Assessment SPD. This SPD was given great weight by 3 separate government inspectors, and the SPD states any development should respond to the scale of the surroundings. Valley Drive is a road of 90% single-storey bungalows 4.2 metres high. If permission is granted for a first-floor extension to be built above the ridge height, it would set a dangerous precedent which could totally change the character of Valley Drive, and we cannot understand why this has been recommended, as all past applications have been refused, including 4 separate government inspectors on grounds of height and character. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Dr. Pancholi, the applicant, please.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, thanks for allowing me to speak. I would just begin by saying that the planning officer's report and the recommendations are very, very comprehensive, and I fully support what they have recommended. This application site lies in the urban boundary as defined by the Maidstone Borough Council wide local plan. The proposed first floor rear extension is set back from Valley Drive about 60 meters, and it's the views of the property from the street are obscured by the established tall mature trees in front of the house. On the back of the property, there are large mature trees screening from the Lewes Valley. In the present application, it has been changed in the scale, the design and the pattern to rectify all the reasons for previous refusals. The proposed extension is about 32 meters behind the nearest neighboring property, and it shouldn't dominate when it is viewed from that angle too. A proposed obscure glazing would prevent any overlooking of the nearest property. In the Valley Drive, there are a number of double-story houses, and the house next door has got a first floor. So this is not going to be anything unique in the Valley Drive. So I would summarize saying that the present application overcomes the Council's previous reasons for refusal. The proposed first floor extension is now consistent with the existing character and the appearance of the property. There are no adverse impacts upon the character, appearance, and visual amenity of the locality. The proposed extension complies with requirements set out in the development plan, and it would not result in any adverse impacts on adjoining neighboring properties. So I would appeal to the committee to allow this extension, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Any declarations of lobbying, ladies and gentlemen? No? Right. I must admit, it's a first for me to see an objection on a planning application, loss of a Leylandii hedge. That's a first. Most times that would be considered a planning gain, given the general public perception, rightly so, of Leylandii hedges. There were many applications, have been many applications refused in and around Valley Drive, many of them deservedly so. But it's all a question of proportionality, scale and design. The distance is quite considerable. Under the old residential extensions guide, which used to be in place, called Kent Design, it was 22 metres property to property wall that was generally taken as the guide. So in that sense, it would be difficult to argue that it's too close. The question really comes down to members' assessment of the design quality of the building or not, as to whether that is, whether the existing building, the permitted development extensions and this proposed extension are actually in keeping with each other. Councillor Harwood, you indicating.
Right, thank you, Chairman. Looking at this site, even though it is becoming quite a large bungalow now and quite kind of ranch-like, I think the fact that it's on such a big plot and the fact that it's so well landscaped mitigates against the individual impact. The one suggestion I would make is when the inspector agreed the residential extensions SPD, he picked out a few features in them as being quite innovative. One of them was in relation to like the building in niches for wildlife, and because of the proximity to the Lewes Valley, I suggest that we need a bat brick or a bat tube in the eaves, but with that addition, to comply with the SPD, I'm happy to move that we grant permission as per the papers.
Thank you, Councillor Prendergast. Did you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Councillor Bolton, were you just seconding or did you wish to speak? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. This site, believe it or not, if you look at the two houses to the east, the middle of those three used to be, if you go to the, yeah, so if you look to the one to the east, that used to be the house that was central, and all of these three gardens were one plot. They actually built those two houses either side. So clearly it has taken some additional development in the past. In terms of its siting and the landscape that Tony mentions, some years ago, this used to actually be an open house when they used to do the Lewes Gardens, and it is really quite a remarkable garden. So I do think that there's definitely benefits for doing that. But in terms of the actual design, if we go back to the design, this site has been quite contentious over the years because there's been a lot of applications that have been put forward for many homes in this garden, and a lot of the concerns in the past were they were the sort of very substantial two-storey buildings overlooking the crest of the valley as you go into the back gardens. So I quite applaud the fact that these houses are being sort of cherished and how can I say, money being spent on them that will potentially discourage the notion of developing these sites intensively. So I think that the applicant has, I mean, the Lewes Road Area Character Assessment document specifically talks about the heights of the bungalows towards the edge of the valley at this point. And while it's two-storey, I think efforts have been taken to keep it as minimal as it may be, and it's still in the original line of these three bungalows, as opposed to previous applications that have come right onto the crest of the valley. You've got the Lewes allotments on the right-hand side there. So I think that actually this is probably quite a positive development for that site.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Mumford, I think you get the last.
Yeah, I think I need to speak earlier on. I spoke in favour of Lewes Parish Council and said we should listen to them. They've called this in and they haven't even come here to support a resident, which I think is appalling. The only, and this is just a personal one, I always believe that if a window has to be obscured and limited opening, it shouldn't have been put in the first place because it does overlook. However, that's a personal comment.
Thank you. Right, I think that's it. The motion, a slightly amended recommendation has been proposed with bat box. And not our box, bat box. And it's been duly proposed and seconded. I will put that to the vote. Those in favour, please indicate. I think that's everyone, but just in case, those against, abstentions. Thank you very much, members. Well, I'm sorry it was a bit lengthy at times this evening, and we've got to do it all again next week. But
is there any way we can save paper? We just had the SPST, and then I was just issued with new papers that are exactly the same. Can we not just say, please pay respect to whatever tree or whatever paper, and more importantly, the money? And can you just extrapolate for the same thing, please?
I think that's right. There's no real need to go.
I just raise a point as well. Where we have agendas like this, when it was obvious that we were going to have an adjourned meeting, could we have some notice as soon as possible, preferably when the agenda is published, as to which items will be rolled over to next week? Because I'll give you an example for tonight's meeting. I waited until I found out from the Vice Chairman yesterday what was going to be on the agenda before reading it. I then read this agenda in a bit of a rush on the train to and from work, because I just didn't have any other time to it. And if our job's to come here and represent our residents and to look thoroughly at the applications and to do as much research as possible, not knowing what's going to be adjourned until next week doesn't leave us very much time, because otherwise you end up reading all the applications and then doing it all over again the next week. And it's not conducive to good decision-making. I'm sorry that's a bit of a rant, but we have enough to read anyway, so the more that can be streamlined, the better.
It would be difficult to give notice quite that far in advance, because to a very large extent the amount of rollovers are entirely dependent on how many people register to speak. However, it would be possible to notify members of this committee and substitutes earlier than we have been doing. And I don't see any reason why, once the Vice Chairman and the Chairman have agreed what is going to be rolled over, why we can't walk out of that meeting and immediately tell all the members and substitutes of this committee. And this point has already been raised with me separately by Councillor Mumford, just so people are aware of that. You would have to bear in mind that would be a recommendation for with rollover, and the final decision is obviously not taken until you get here.
Mr. Chairman, it almost comes to the stage, though, that you're sort of saying we've got 12 things here. If you looked at any amount of speaking on them, and some of them are obvious, there's no way we were going to get through them. So we almost need to say, why are we having so many put on these nights?
Well, that is another issue, which we need to look at. But frankly, we do need to try and do what we can on that. But doing it a week in advance is actually just impossible.
There's 2 points. First point is the Chair and Vice Chair and myself and the officers only meet on the Tuesday to decide in terms of what goes on the agenda and what's deferred in the order. So we wouldn't be able to notify members till at least Tuesday afternoon, and that would be Debbie. So I think there could be a commitment that if there is going to be that issue, subject to Chair and Vice Chair's approval, we could email effectively what we're recommending to members on the Tuesday afternoon. At least that gives you some time to review. With regard to the number of items on the agenda, I mean, the reality is there's lots of items on the agenda that have extensions of time that, have been negotiated till either the next day of the agenda. So these are all either required to be determined or have extensions of time till the day after the planning committee. So it's quite difficult. I have to get the items on the agenda to get them through the system. So obviously the only option is, as the Chair said, is possibly more meetings.
Right. The fact of the matter is applications come in, we have to deal with them, and we don't have control over them. But what we can try and do is streamline the process insofar as members' time is concerned, and also save on as much paper as possible, as Councillor Cox suggested. But Councillor Bolton...
It doesn't really answer my question, because the Vice Chairman is very good at telling me, because he knows that this is a particular issue of mine, on the Tuesday what's going to be adjourned, which is absolutely fine. My issue is, if there's any chance of any sort of prior notice if you move your meeting to a Monday or something, but I appreciate planning constraints. So, having said that, I think the only obvious answer is to move our meetings every fortnight, to be honest, Mr. Chairman. And then you'll have sort of like, with smaller agendas, I guess, because you'll have more meetings, and we'll have more of an idea in advance.
If that is what has to happen, that is what will have to happen, but we can't make that decision here and now. That would have to be done elsewhere. I have to say that we did get into a position where we were meeting almost fortnightly, but then we managed to get it down again. Councillor Prendergast. We have been trying to be more flexible with conditions, but these are all things we need to talk about, which suggests, Mr Bailey, that as Councillor Round was saying earlier, we do need a meeting fairly soon of the chairman and political group spokesman and vice chairman. We need to discuss some of these issues and consult with our members, but I suggest that perhaps 10 to 11 on a Thursday night is not the best time to further discuss this, and we need to give it some considered thought. Sorry? No, please don't. But thank you very much for your comments, members.
Chairman, before we all go, can you all take your papers with you, please? And if you're a sub, can you give your papers to your member? And you'll just have an agenda front page for next week.